Ain't that right, Dickie?
Who are you calling Dickie?
Jason Todd, more like Jason Turd. You think you are cool because you are the edgy Robin, but Tim Drake could school your ass in mystery solving any day. Anyway.
Spoiler warning for Batman Gotham by Gaslight.
Mature content warning. Rape and sexual assault are discussed in this so-called podcast.
Welcome to episode
16
of The Horror of Babylon, where we are discussing the film adaptation of Batman, Gotham by Gaslight. I'm your host, Ryan, and with me, as always, is Daniel. Say hi, Daniel.
Hi, Daniel.
And still with us, thank you again, Hef, for coming up a second time. We really appreciate it. We have Chris from our last episode. Say hi, Chris.
Hi, Chris. Of course, I can't copy you, so it's just like, hi, Hef.
Hi, Hef.
Hi, Hef.
How you doing?
I'm good.
Right.
I just sucked up some helium. How are we?
Apparently, Gingy from Shrek is here.
Hey, it's relevant because we're going to be talking about, the film adaptation, which did have a Zeppelin in it, which may have run on helium.
No, it applies.
Jesus, the helium!
Okay, so we're going to get right into some of our background information. Gotham by Gaslight was released in 2018. It was directed by Sam Liu, who also directed... if you just look up his IMDb page, basically he's directed like every major DC animated feature from the past 10 years. But here are some of them: The Killing Joke, Superman Red Sun, Batman Year One. Also in Marvel, he did Planet Hulk and Hulk Versus, also Death of Superman. It was written...
Did he do both of the Hulk verses, like the Wolverine?
Yeah, Wolverine and Thor.
I didn't know they have the same director.
Mm-hmm.
I really like Hulk versus.
Yeah, I think Hulk Versus is great. Planet Hulk is also very good.
I've seen Planet Hulk.
Yeah. I think, similarly to Batman, the Hulk animated movies are maybe better than the Hulk live action movies.
Hulk versus was my first introduction to Deadpool and my brief years of obsession with that character.
It was also my first obsession with Deadpool. Yeah. So there's actually tangent already on a tangent. Recently they released a Hulk Doctor Strange animated film that is a Halloween themed movie where I forget who the villain is. It's a Doctor Strange villain I wasn't super familiar with, but he comes out on Halloween and he turns all the trick-or-treaters into real monsters, and Hulk and Doctor Strange have to deal with it. And it's not geared towards adults, it's a little more geared towards kids, but I thought it was super fun.
Hulk smash puny children
And take candy.
Actually, I'm just going to give you guys the title of that
Also, quick. Can we also approve Steve Blum as a Wolverine?
Yes.
Okay.
He is my Wolverine. And I love... Okay, so there can be two Wolverines, but yes.
If there can be 50 Batmans, there can be two Wolverines.
So, on Wolverine recasting, what do you guys think of Tom Hardy?
I don't hate it.
Hulk, Where Monsters Dwell, is that one.
I'd watch it.
Yeah.
Daniel Radcliffe should be Wolverine.
Daniel Radcliffe?
Why not? He had that one movie where he had guns stapled to his hands. Why can't he have claws?
I say Tom Cruise because he's the right height.
Ooh.
No, that's horrible. I want Tom Cruise to be Green Lantern.
So my pick for Wolverine is Richard Armitage, who played Thorn in the Hobbit movies.
Okay. No, that's pretty good.
He plays Wolverine in the Wolverine audio drama podcast.
I'm with the general majority that just thinks we should actually just inject Hugh Jackman with adamantium.
Oh no, that's the first choice.
I mean,
if that's possible, that's the first choice. Yeah. Okay, back on topic. So, all right. So, it was written by James Krieg, it has a lot of TV credits. He's written for cartoons such as The Real Ghostbusters,
Good.
Spider-Man the Animated Series, various Scooby-Doo projects,
Love 'em.
Monk, Ben 10, Batman the Brave and the Bold, and a lot of Lego DC projects.
That's a pretty good resume.
As far as DC animated features, he also wrote Justice League versus the Fatal Five, Batman and Harley Quinn, and The Death and the Return of Superman.
Justice League versus the Fatal Five is one of those ones that I super simp over. So I'm starting to like this movie a little more than I did before.
Okay, so what I want to do first is have everybody go around and say what their first encounter with the movie itself was. And we're going to start with you, Chris. First time you saw this movie, what were your thoughts? Have you watched it a lot since then? Just
I watched it 2 or 3 times, mainly just because I think it's like a standalone alternate universe Batman movie. Like, I think it's pretty solid. DC animated universe, I think, really has a good tendency to have their films, like, even when they're not good, they're not great, they're still okay.
Yeah.
Like, there's a general rule with DC animated features that you're still probably going to moderately enjoy what you watch. Like, there's not really too many just bad ones. And I think this one kind of falls into that category as being like a good, solid, standalone feature that, you know, if you're in, based on what you all have told me, is radically different as it seems from the book.
completely different.
Yeah. I feel like DC is also, like, especially with their animated films, they tend to take a pretty safe approach, which is like, they're very formulaic in how they go about their deal. It's basically like, you know, here's your introduction, fight scene. Here's your little bit more story plot, fight scene. Like, you know, just generally, they keep a good pace, I think, with a lot of their films. And this one, like, Gotham by Gaslight, I do feel like had a good pace to it. There wasn't really any low points as far as, like, you getting bored during the plot. I think they streamlined a lot of the actual plot. Like, it was very easy to follow, very much just indicative of what DC animated movies have really kind of become. It's just like, you know, here's your general plot, let's just kind of follow this in a very streamlined manner. And I think Gotham by Gaslight is a good example of DC animated universe taking just a decent foothold into, again, an alternative storyline to Batman, which, as we are, I'm sure, very well aware at this point, Batman's kind of like their safe place.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's really hard to fuck up Batman.
Currently in DC's top selling books, and all comic books in the top 50 sales, the only DC books are Batman books now.
When I was still working at the comic store, the last time I remember looking up the sales numbers, do you want to know what the highest selling DC character was?
Who? It's Harley Quinn, wasn't it?
It was Harley Quinn.
Yeah.
It was Spider-Man for Marvel, which Spider-Man is basically always the highest selling Marvel one. But at the time, it was Harley Quinn. It was within a year or two of Suicide Squad coming out.
Yeah.
Last time I looked.
And she's a character who is a offshoot from Batman.
From
comics.
Batman, from the animated series.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, because the guy who wrote it was just, he just made her up.
Yeah, he's
like,
like,
just randomly.
this will be my waifu and no one else's.
How wrong was he?
Margot Robbie level wrong.
Yeah. Okay, so Daniel, what was your first experience with this movie? When was it? Just general thoughts on it.
I just finished reading Gotham by Gaslight for the podcast, and I immediately went home for my 13-hour shift and watched Gotham by Gaslight, the animated movie.
And then hopefully passed out.
And then I was up for about 5 more hours, and then I finally slept.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's a hell of a drug.
Yeah.
And on your first watching, what were your just general thoughts?
I thought it was better than the comic book. I was like, this fixes a lot of the problems I had with the comic book. So I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun to watch.
So my first experience was Thursday during the day. So we're recording this on a Saturday. So 2 days ago, I reread Gotham by Gaslight for the third time, or reread for the second time, read for the third time. And then I was trying really hard not to prejudge the movie based on what I knew of it. I really loved the book, and I was afraid I wasn't going to like the movie. I started watching it, and I watched about 10 minutes, didn't like those 10 minutes, and then I turned it off. I said, okay, I'll watch it tomorrow. I was also not in a great mood that day. I was afraid that I was going to watch it in a bad mood, already kind of prejudging, thinking I wasn't going to like it, and I was going to end up hating it. So I turned it off and said, I'll watch it tomorrow after a good night's sleep, and I'll have a better opinion. And then you and I went and saw The Batman. Which I was literally afraid I was going to fall asleep during because I was so tired. Did not fall asleep through The Batman, but without getting into all that, I'm not going to get into my opinion on The Batman, except that it was too long.
If they had to trim 30 minutes from Batman v Superman, they should have trimmed at least 20 from this movie.
I think you could make a cut of that movie that's 30 to 45 minutes shorter.
I also think it needed 1 or 2 rewrites to remove a couple of the subplots, but we talked about that.
Right. Okay. We're not talking about The Batman. So I watched it yesterday, which was Friday, and
there's a lot of physicality happening on the other end of the mic.
He's talking with his hands.
A night's sleep and a day of waiting didn't really help my opinion with it, but it wasn't until the end that I really got tipped over the edge. As I'm watching it, I'm thinking, I don't think this is very good, but I also don't hate it. Like Hef was saying earlier, for me, even like a bad DC movie is still more entertaining than most things. Until they got to the end, and I just totally went off, and I was so upset, so mad.
He was messaging me at work.
But we're not going to talk about that now. We're going to continue on. Okay, so moving into structure, I'm going to throw to you, Daniel. How is the structure of the movie different from the structure of the comic?
You don't get any of those, journal scenes. You don't get... I don't remember if they had any flashes of it. I don't remember any, newspaper clippings or things like that.
Hef, do you have...
It's same general, in film adaptation, there's... I think they have a scene where, people are talking about him.
They do it a lot more audibly.
It's more of a, hushed tones, almost kind of year one stuff.
Yeah,
where it's more just people...
It jumps into him being the Batman a lot sooner.
I liked that, because, like you said earlier, where, you can only kill Thomas and Martha so many times. It's like killing Uncle Ben. We're really just tired of it at this point.
Which was a great part of Spider-Man Homecoming, where they just skip all that.
Mm-hmm.
I was glad that they skipped that. I was sad that I missed Freud. I thought that it was missing a lot of those historical analogies.
Okay, and jumping into themes, that is kind of just, aside from Jack the Ripper himself, Sigmund Freud, Sherlock Holmes, most of that is all just kind of excised from it.
Yeah. They added the World Fair.
They did add the World Fair, which, as we talked about in the last episode, is an element from the sequel, Master of the Future.
And I thought it was good to combine those.
Yeah, that was fine. When I started watching it, I was afraid that what they were going to do was mash the two stories together.
Yeah.
Which would have been even worse.
That would have been bad.
That would have been...
I disagree with that. That would have been bad.
Yeah, which they didn't do, thankfully. So, themes that are in both the comic and in the movie, Victorian London, a redesign of Gotham to be, with that,
more Victorian.
Yeah, more Victorian, the different architecture, the different costumes. Hef, when you first saw this movie, what was your thoughts and your opinion on the redesign of Gotham, the redesign of the bat suit, just in general? Go ahead.
As far as the actual Gotham itself, I do feel like in this movie a little bit more than most, Gotham was kind of another character. They had much more. They focused more on, the world as it was seen in this particular universe, because they kind of had to emphasize that with the, you know, like the tone of like just the look of the buildings, the carriages, the horses, like, you know, just to make it of that Victorian era. So I think special attention needed to be made for that to be a believable concept in this film. So I think, honestly, like as far as like a general just like background and even the color, like the colors, like and it's not like, it's probably not as starkly different as what the book kind of makes you have, where you have those very whites and blacks and yellows and stuff like that. Because this is animation. Animation is, you know, actively moving, so it has to do. But I do feel like they did kind of keep that kind of just, you know, everything's in the dark of night. Things are kind of misty in this film, which is something I liked.
So I want to jump in there.
Okay.
Something that I was very critical of this movie yesterday, that after sleeping on, I've realized was an unfair expectation on my part and was never going to happen. In my perfect world, this movie aesthetically would have stood out from the other DC movies and would have also had a limited color palette and be very, you know, lots of blacks, whites, yellows, and dark browns, and been like the comic, and maybe had a different type of character design to be more similar to the comic. I was upset about that yesterday, but after thinking about it, one, that was never going to happen. Two, like you just said, it's animation, it's a different medium, that would not have looked as good on the screen as it did in the page. But something they did do in the movie that they didn't, to kind of compensate for that, was add a lot of mist.
You did like the mist.
Which, I love the mist too. Which...
Bunch of king nerds. And...
Yeah. We call ourselves the Kingdom.
I bet you do.
That has to be a podcast. That name has to be taken.
I'm not aware of it. We can't spin off a horror podcast as a Stephen King podcast, can we? But yeah, the mist itself in the film was a great tool to kind of compensate for that kind of lack of a color palette that was in the comic that they couldn't realistically put in the movie.
And in addition, I feel like the movie itself went more for a tone rather than most of the DC films. Like, it kind of kept a darker tone, more like everything seemed more sinister to me in the film because of just the way that they animated it, the mist and various just aspects of it. Even the plot, like the plot seemed just as almost as sinister as the tone itself of the film. Like, I think, and that's, again, we'll get to that, I'm sure, here soon in a bit. I just, as a DC, not even just as a DC film, but just as a general animation, I think they did it right. I think they got a lot of the tone right. I think they animated very well, taking from the source material. Now, you asked about the costume. I wasn't aware that World War II attire was available in the 1890s, but I could be wrong. I think they tried, and this may be more me than it. I think because of the mist element, because of the tone, I think they went more steampunky with the film.
Yeah.
Than they did, obviously, with the book. Because the book, it's, from what I'm seeing just from the, you know, panels and the art and stuff like that, it does take a very much Victorian London aspect where you have those intense colors. So one of the things I think the film tries to do a little bit differently is it adds kind of a steampunky element to it, so that the futuristic, not futuristic, that's the wrong word, the aesthetic is much more emphasized, just because, again, it's animation. It has to do a little bit more on the screen than what, you know, you can generally pick from the tone up of a book. So
You just pulled up a picture of Selena Kyle.
Yeah.
I love her hair.
Yeah.
We're gonna get to Selena.
And his you know, like, but again, it's a DC animated film, so I mean, I feel like it's, you know, I think the steampunky thing works as far as like him having gadgets and things like that. So I think if they're going to do it if that's what they're going to take, I think it's better they do it that way.
I also think steampunk might be a little bit more acceptable in the mainstream than a lot of Victorian age aesthetics.
Also, this movie,
For comic book nerds, anyway.
this movie was made 29 years after the comic book was written.
Yeah.
Um,
So some sensibilities have changed.
yes. Another thing that I was kind of upset about on that first viewing was that, like I said, I really appreciated in the book where it's less and more, and Batman, you never get a good look at Batman, and he's more in the dark. You don't get a full costume. But after sleeping on it again, that's kind of an unfair criticism because that just wouldn't have worked as well in an animated film. In a Batman movie, people want to see his costume. People have posters that are just Batman costumes throughout the years.
Yeah.
That's something that people want to see.
People want to see Batman interacting with people.
And again, I liked in the book that he didn't have gadgets.
Mm-hmm.
But in an animated film, especially one that's as long as this one is, it's like 70 some minutes, it's hard to have Batman in that many action scenes and not have him have his grappling hook.
I think a good compromise would have been like a more traditional grappling hook, like something a ninja might have used.
Yeah, just like a hook on a line.
And throwing it instead of he didn't use batarangs, but instead of batarangs you throw a knife.
I'm not sure he used any gadgets
other than the grappling hook. I'm just
Yeah.
giving examples.
No, I think you're right. I think that would have been nice if he had just like the hook on a line instead of.
That would have been my compromise.
A lot of these animated films were like subscribe, like I said, to what I would consider a safe approach.
Yeah.
Which is basically they know what people want, they know what people like.
Yeah.
This doesn't feel like a movie that needed as many action sequences as it had.
I would have cut a couple of them out. Yeah.
There is like the last one is entirely too long, and then there's just
If you would have kept the last one, I would have cut at least two of the others.
right. Like, and I think, but with DC animated films, again, you know, they go with their demographic. So if I could offer a criticism as far as like animation versus the written page, it is that DC does have a tendency to run a little bit more on its action sequences. Not that I don't enjoy them, but this is not a film that would have suffered from one less fight sequence or two.
I do think that it's sort of funny as a hype as DC does for the Batman, how much they always build him up. He got his butt kicked a lot in this movie.
He did, but I honestly think that worked though, like in this one, because I mean he does. Like you guys said, his gadgets aren't as over the top as what would be in like a Justice League film or anything like that. So I mean, it is.
There's no Batcopter.
But I mean,
he hasn't mastered all 127 martial arts yet.
So I mean, again, that's a slight grievance. But to be fair to the film, that's a grievance I have with most DC, like Batman specific films.
So let me ask your expert opinion here. Who decided it was the safe decision to have Bruce fuck Barbara in The Killing Joke?
Apparently, Sam Liu.
Wasn't it? Hold on.
This is the Gotham by Gaslight podcast. This is the Gotham by Gaslight podcast. This is not the Killing Joke podcast. You cannot.
No, who created Harley Quinn? Because it was him.
Paul something. Paul Dini, I believe, is his name.
It has the other one, Tim something.
Tim. Oh shit. Tim. Bruce. No, it's Bruce Timm, I think.
Bruce Timm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which.
Somebody tried to call him out on it on a panel, and he screamed at them. This is my fan fiction.
Real quick before we move into characters, or this could be our prelude into characters. Based on the cover, I thought Zatanna was in this movie. And I was disappointed. First I was like, how the hell did they fit Zatanna into this movie? And then I was like, why is it Zatanna in this movie? She's on the cover. No, it's Catwoman, but...
I didn't think it was Zatanna. I was just like, that's an interesting choice for Catwoman.
If you see a woman, if she's in a DC movie, and she has black hair, and it's pinned up like that, and she's wearing a top hat, I'm going to think Zatanna.
If you're, I mean,
but I was also thinking Batman.
I think that's a sexist remark. And honestly, if you look at that person in the cloak, there's very little woman that I'm looking at on that cloak.
Okay. Now this is me. She is not a Batman character, but I associate her with Batman, and that's because of the Justice League cartoon, episode 2, with Batman and Wonder Woman, where she gets turned into a pig.
Oh, yeah,
it's unlimited.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a good. That's a good sequence.
That I associate.
Also,
her with
Kevin
Batman because of
Conroy
this.
can fucking sing. Can we
Yeah.
gush about that for a minute?
No, yeah, you're right.
Oh my god.
Kevin Conroy, come on our podcast and sing.
Okay, so jumping into characters, we're going to throw to Hef first here, starting with the man, Bruce Wayne, a.k.a. the Batman. What are your thoughts on Bruce in this movie?
Bruce Greenwood can do no wrong.
Bruce Greenwood is quickly becoming one of my favorite Batman.
I like him. Like he's been winning me over like more and more. Like Red Hood.
Yes.
Like oh my god.
Yes.
Like because he's been Batman a few times. And have you all?
You know when Red Hood came out, people talked so much shit on him at the time.
Fuck those people.
I mean that's arguably like the best one that they have. Like it's up there.
Like people
as
love
one of the best ones.
People
they
love
have.
the movie, but they talk shit on his voice acting at the time.
Oh, Bruce Greenwood, really?
He's Captain Christopher fucking Pike. Screw these
They
people.
were like, just get Kevin Conroy again.
Kevin Conroy is great.
Yeah,
But
he is.
I
But
can't
I
be
agree.
Batman
Don't beat him to
forever.
death. Yeah.
I'm just telling you, like based off of the stupid forums I
Right.
visited at the time, that was like the general feedback was they should have gotten a different voice actor.
Okay.
And now everyone loves him.
Yeah.
I just think people needed to give it time.
But yeah, Bruce Greenwood does awesome with this iteration of Batman. As far as the Batman character, I mean, I don't think there's a whole lot to discuss. There's like it's unlike with you, what you guys were talking about, where like he has that dynamic personality difference in the book.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the case in this film. Like he doesn't. Like it's just because again, I don't think the movie is really gearing towards that. Like you guys said, it's about, you know, in the book there's more of a personality shift because he trained with Freud to be able to understand, you know, the human psyche and how he knows that there can't be a correlation between Batman and Bruce Wayne. This movie, since it doesn't have that, it's not necessary in the film to me for him to have that dual personality. It bugs me. It bugs me that it doesn't.
And to be fair to this movie, it also isn't 3 hours long.
But he's also consider like the time for like I think again it's that Victorian era kind of form of respect, I guess.
Yeah.
Like gentlemen were gentlemen, right? So you didn't have really a lot of these people acting out and doing all this stuff. So Bruce is being, in a sense, a realistic 1890s gentleman.
Quick side tangent here. Bruce Greenwood has played Batman fewer times than I would have thought. He
I gotta
was
think of 4.
under the Red Hood, and then also Death in the Family. Young Justice, Gotham by Gaslight, and I think that's it.
You all watch Young Justice?
Yeah,
It's
love
good.
Young
It's good.
Justice.
It's good stuff.
Love Young Justice.
Yeah, that's a quick aside.
Yeah, that's it. Those are the only.
Superboy is best boy.
I agree with that.
Yeah. That's not just my Superman fanboyism. I love the way he's written in that show.
Yeah, I like it. There's a lot of stuff I like about it. Anyway, what was the original question?
No, just your Daniel.
no.
What are your thoughts on Batman or Bruce in this movie?
I think it did an okay job. I would have liked to see him as Bruce Wayne a little bit more, but just like a tad more. I really would have liked to see him with Freud or Sherlock Holmes, just anybody.
One of the things I did enjoy about this movie quite a bit is Bruce, Selena, and Harvey going out on the town.
That was a great sequence.
I really like that scene, especially Bruce disguising Selena
just
as a
puts
man.
a hat on her. I don't think he was fooled by my disguise. Well, I own the place, so it doesn't matter. That to me, that's very Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
Have you seen like the theatrical cut of Justice League?
We saw it together opening night in theaters.
Did we?
Yeah.
It was
God.
so
We went
bad.
to,
It was so bad they don't remember.
We went to Bob Evans before with your mom and Baby Penis.
Huh.
And Beck and Emma and
I thought that was Batman v Superman.
I'm pretty sure it was Justice League
I don't know. My timeline's confused.
because Emma went with us, but she did not go with us to Batman versus Superman on opening night
Okay, but
because she was a little older for Justice League.
when Batman at the end goes, "I bought the bank."
Mm-hmm.
It's a Batman thing to say. It's a Batman comment.
Yeah.
So that was a great scene.
Where they're at the World Fair and they're having the impromptu city council meeting, and he walks up. He's like, "I'm just checking to see how you guys were spending my money."
Yeah, it's a big dick billionaire move. It reminds me of something like a non-cringy Elon Musk might say. So,
okay, so another character here with more to talk about, because she was not in the book
as a named character.
Yeah, as a named character, is Selena Kyle, aka the Catwoman. Daniel, go ahead and kick us off. What do you think? Like, one, putting her in the story at all, and two, how was she in the movie itself?
I think if you're going to add a character, she was an easy one to add. Didn't distract from the story. They kind of kept. I don't know if it was Frank Miller who wrote her as a prostitute.
In year one, yeah.
Year one.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that was Frank Miller. I don't know if she was a prostitute in this movie, but kind of a showgirl. Not really all that well respected.
She almost gave me the feel of being like a madam, like the woman who runs the brothel.
Yeah. She kind of was written as a person who wasn't respected by all the rich men around her, but she was still surviving and caring about the people who were in her neighborhood and her lives, because Jack the Ripper's going around murdering poor women. That's very Selena Kyle. And if you're going to interject Selena Kyle into a Jack the Ripper story, they did a very good job with it. That is also the character I would tell you to eject in this story.
That's an element of year one, is that she's defending other prostitutes.
Yeah.
And with no spoilers, that's a huge element in The Batman.
Yeah.
Is that she's defending women who are being treated by this old boys club in Gotham.
Yeah. If you're going to add a character to this type of story, Selena Kyle's the one I would tell you to add. And not just because she's probably the most marketable Batman love interest.
She is. I mean, they had the whole wedding thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But that was a fiasco.
it was. But
But I'm still mad at Tom King.
have your thoughts on Catwoman in Gotham by Gaslight?
I think it's another DC safe move.
Yeah.
Like you said, she's an easy inclusion. I'll tell you what the biggest reason I think she was added to the film for is because we are now in it's 2022. You know, everybody has, you know, women's rights are at the forefront of a lot of things. Even now, even though they have technically been solved back in the 70s or whatever like that, right?
I love the quotation marks that no one can see.
Because they haven't.
But
Yeah.
my point about it is that DC likes to have strong female characters, and it's important that they have these strong female characters because, for the most part, comics, as a rule, have been male-dominated. And I think Gotham by Gaslight is one of those films that, if you were to not include someone like Selena Kyle...
It's just a bunch of women being murdered.
Yeah, kinda. So I feel like adding Selena Kyle to this movie it's a safe move for them, and it fits along with the paradigm of, you know, less of a woman of ill repute and more of, you know, just a strong, powerful female that is able to fit into this Elseworld view that is Batman.
Catwoman was pro-sex worker before it was cool.
I think it's particularly important for this specific DC story to insert a strong female character because the premise of the story is women being victimized.
Mm-hmm.
And there are really no female characters in the book. Granted, it was written in 1989. It's 52 pages long. They didn't really have... It's not something that they were thinking about or had an opportunity to do. But the whole premise is that women are being murdered. Putting a female character into the story that's trying to actively do something about that.
It's important for women not to feel... Or not to... it's obviously it's important for women not to feel helpless, but it's also important that, you know, the media that is, you know, coming up on a story like this that could be rather sensitive has something to play off that. It's just like, as a counteraction to your women being beaten or slaughtered, whatever that is, it only makes sense to me to have a female character that is on the opposite spectrum of that leading the charge against someone like that.
Okay, so like the book, Alfred is not heavily used in this story, but do you guys have any thoughts generally about?
I really don't have anything to add to Alfred. Do you have anything to add to Alfred?
No.
He was Alfred, but he wasn't really. They focused on characters that they included more than like building up characters.
I
who were
think
in the
every
original
Batman
story.
movie should have one required Alfred Pennyworth quip, and that's it.
Daniel, what are your thoughts on the Robins?
I actually liked them. One of the things that I thought the story, the graphic novel was missing was an inclusion of something like that. I think it went a little too far. I would have only had like one of the Robins.
Instead of all three of them?
Instead of all three of them being orphans at the same time. I get why they did that.
I think if it would have been good if it was just Jason.
Jason would have been my pick. I would have accepted any of them as like orphans this is what happens if Batman wasn't around to take them at the time. All three of them at the same time I thought was a little much. But that was like a little something I would have liked in the graphic novel or in the comic book.
Again, with the number of pages they have.
Yeah. I liked that they kind of had a little character arc.
With Alfred.
Yeah, with Alfred. Oh, no, you don't have to steal from me. Just come over. You work for me and I'll give you food. Thank you, Mr. Billionaire. I guess he's a billionaire's butler, but still. He's upper management.
What did you think of the boys Dick, Jason, and Tim?
I think people like Easter eggs.
Yeah. I like Easter eggs.
That my initial thought on the first, that first scene before I saw the whole movie, is that it was a little jarring for these three street rats to be named after our initial three Robins. Kind of pulled me out of it, like at the end of The Dark Knight Rises, where Joseph Gordon-Levitt was.
They call me Robin.
Yeah, it gave me that feeling. It got better throughout the movie because obviously the three of them weren't fleshed out a lot, but you did get to see that the one named Dick was kind of the leader and the more level-headed one, and the one named Jason was the more aggressive one. So that made me feel better about it.
And Tim Drake existed.
I really like Tim Drake.
I like Tim Drake too, but DC shafts him a lot.
He does. I mean, which I understand because Dick Grayson is Robin.
Yeah.
And then Jason Todd is the bad boy Robin.
Is the edgy Robin, and Tim Drake is the other one.
And then Damian Wayne's in a lot of modern stories.
And he's literally Batman's son.
Because he's Batman's son, exactly. Yeah. But I like Tim Drake because he was obsessed with Batman's detective skills, and he wanted to be the student because he liked the detective part of Batman, which is what I always like about Batman. Okay, that's a tangent.
Yeah, it's an appropriate tangent, though.
So we're going to move on to our next character, and I'm going to kick it off because I started this movie Thursday. And
I had so many comments already.
I watched 2 minutes of it, I paused it, and I texted Daniel, and I said, starting the movie with a striptease by Poison Ivy with the chest of a 12-year-old boy was the decision they made.
You know, for a podcast that was just talking about how important women are,
I didn't say it was a flawless execution. I just said I knew what they were trying to do.
When I saw this, my opinion was, it looks like they tried to desexualize her by giving her a flatter chest while making her do a striptease. And I'm sitting there like, at that point you should just draw her as Poison Ivy if you're going to include this scene.
My honest opinion is that it would have been less distracting if she just wasn't Poison Ivy, she was just a woman.
I liked her as Poison Ivy. I did not like her as mysterious, flat-chested Poison Ivy.
Poison Ivy would not have just stood there and let herself get stabbed to death.
But it probably would have happened if she didn't have superpowers.
I still think if you're assuming that the characters are still personality-wise the same as they are in the main stories, she would have tried to fight. She would have tried to resist. She wouldn't have just stood there and gotten stabbed. Which is, I know for the story, that's what would have worked, but I just don't think she should have been Poison Ivy. He should have made it Harley Quinn getting stabbed to death, and then this would have been the best movie ever.
I would have also preferred it to be Harley Quinn. To me, it was strictly just like an art thing that I found distracting. You're literally sexualizing a character, but trying to draw her less sexy at the same time.
That also bothered me. On top of, it shouldn't have been Ivy at all. Or if it was going to be Ivy, she should have at least like tried to fight him a little bit.
Yeah,
I'm not a Poison Ivy fanboy. I just don't think it's an accurate depiction of the character.
Before we get into Jack the Ripper, it would have been funny if they would have had Joker be Jack the Ripper and then stab Harley Quinn to death. But
Ooh.
Have anything to add to the Poison Ivy discussion?
I mean,
Are you feeling itchy, scratchy?
I mean, only from the aloe vera that must be coming from the now stabbed version of her. Unnecessary to even have her. Unnecessary inclusion. In fact, the very fact that you bring Pamela Isley into the idea of being the prostitute in here is just... That's an Easter egg nobody needs.
Yeah.
I just don't see the point. That and I'm like you. It's like, if you're going to put a DC villain, like, or just a notable DC character in here, why would you do it that way?
Yeah, and that's what they did.
It's an unnecessary inclusion.
They do the same thing with Selena, but Selena tries to fight back because that's what Selena would have done. Okay, so some other minor characters, the nun.
I do not hate any movie that includes a nun.
Yeah, I was going to throw to you because you're the
de facto nun guy.
The de facto nun guy.
I have a nun fetish. I am not ashamed of it because I don't kink shame.
You still haven't watched Fire Force, have you?
No.
We call people like
I don't think we call people like
you.
Through it.
We call people like you nunchucks.
Really?
You
That's
can't see
great.
what I'm doing.
That's great. I want that to be the official term.
Nunchuck.
She wasn't bad. I don't know how I just don't know how I feel about
Inventing characters.
They needed another woman to die that was noticeable, so Bruce Wayne could have his moment.
I guess that's the thing, though, is all of the women who die in this movie are characters. The old lady who tried to blackmail him, the nun, Poison Ivy.
I think that Bruce Wayne having a personal connection to so many of the victims was a little, I don't want to say comic booky, but it was very cliche. I liked that the person who tried to blackmail him got murdered, because that's a good way to put it on Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
But you had that plus the nun. I don't know.
Do you know what the name of the priest was?
I don't remember.
It's a Stephen King connection. Father Callahan.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah. So, all right, I've been avoiding it. Somebody else talk about Jim Gordon.
I thought it was a brilliant move.
I thought it was dumb as shit.
Hef, tiebreaker.
I called it in the first 30 minutes of the movie.
Yeah,
I thought it was Harvey. I
No.
realize now I was supposed to think it was Harvey.
I called it in the first 30 minutes. Now, while that may have been, like, I liked that twist. I thought it was just because Jim Gordon is such the Boy Scout. Everything in general, like, fandom from Jim Gordon, there's very few, like year one is good because it shows Gordon as a man.
yeah.
To me, year one isn't a Batman story.
It's a Jim Gordon story.
Absolutely. And I liked that with this one, they gave, I like when they tweak things, like something that's different from the norm.
I'll tell you why I liked it. Okay. For the past 15 odd years, all I have gotten is, hey, what if Superman was a bad guy? But how often do they do that with literally anyone else? So I got to see this and go, oh, okay. So they actually they went for something.
I also like that they made it like...
I don't like his motivation even nearly as much as the comic book Ripper.
It's funny, in the 52 pages of the comic book, they better explain the motivations of the killer than in the 70-minute movie.
I agree with that. Spoiler alert, that's my Koontz.
Yeah.
Is the explanation. My king is actually going to be Jim Gordon being the Ripper.
I like the alter. Again, I like the alteration. I like when they try something.
I like the little room he had with like the pictures. Oh, there's him in his boxing stance. And if you read a lot of Batman comic books, Jim Gordon is a guy who's had to take care of himself.
It was a little bit long Halloween-y in the way they did it, I think. Because his wife's also on board with it. Like, just like, it was just like,
that part
he can burn my face because he's right.
Because he's right.
Oh my god, that would be bad.
To be fair, that's also something that happens to people.
Yeah.
Stockholm Syndrome is a very real thing.
I like the choice just because I feel like it's one of those things where, do you really have a lot of other options?
I think it was the one real risk this movie took, and I think it was to its benefit.
I'd agree. I would agree.
I'm really bad at seeing who the killer is, and I've read every Sherlock Holmes stories that's been published. I've read, the Kendaichi case files, Detective Conan. I've read Agatha Christie. I almost never guess who it was. Okay, without spoilers, the Batman. For half the movie, I was convinced that the Riddler was the person who got shot at the end of the movie.
Huh.
I thought the Riddler was that person for forever.
Okay.
So I'm bad at establishing these things. I'm not upset because I was wrong, because I thought it was Harvey Dent. I realize now that it was written in a way that you're supposed to think it was Harvey Dent.
Yeah, it's a red herring.
Yeah. I'm mad because Jim Gordon is probably my favorite Batman character. And that's basically based off of year one and him being the uncorruptible cop. I'm not saying it was a bad decision or that it was written poorly. I'm saying that I personally didn't like it because I love Jim Gordon and fuck you, Sam Liu.
If we're talking about the killing joke, then yes, fuck you, Sam Liu.
Yeah.
I'm gonna watch it again when I get home to fight you guys.
You go right ahead. You're the only one that suffers for that.
I like the Killing Joke movie. I just fast forward through the
first 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Yes,
I pause.
Thank you. For what? The balcony scene that everybody thinks is awkward?
Yes.
You fucking creep.
You just described like half of my dating life.
I may have been on board with this decision if it was a different character. Like, I don't know. Like if they did it with Alfred.
Or Alfred would have also been a choice.
That would have been cool.
And he's also British, so he would have been in England, because that's where they all live.
Or, obviously he wasn't in it, but if they did it with Red Fox, that could have been a thing. He wasn't, he wasn't in it, but...
I am glad that it wasn't one of the, and I talked about this when we talked about the comic, one of the usual suspects. The only way it would have been cool if it would have been the Jokers if you got to kill Harley Quinn, because that would have been funny.
I love the Joker. He's like the iconic, not only Batman villain, but he's the iconic comic book villain.
Yeah.
But he doesn't have to be in every Batman story.
Doesn't have to be in every Batman story. They didn't make it Victor Zsasz. I thought for the briefest of moments, I was like, is it going to be Hugo Strange?
Until he got ripped to
then
pieces.
I was like, but that was one of the things I also really liked about this movie was, how does Jack the Ripper stay one step ahead of Batman? Oh, he's literally been beside Batman this entire movie, and Batman's been asking him for his advice.
You know what should have tipped me off? Where I initially got really mad, but should have tipped me off, is when Bruce got accused and Jim didn't believe him. I immediately went, Jim Gordon is always on Bruce Wayne, is always on Batman's side. Like, there's no way that Jim Gordon would believe this shit. But he was the killer, so
this is super convenient.
But I had a very emotional reaction to that, so I wasn't thinking. As much as I didn't like this movie, I did have a lot of emotional reactions to it, so that I was engaged the whole way through. Except for the last...
Because you were texting me at work the whole time.
I was pausing and constantly this fucking stupid movie.
And I was going in the freaking nurse's station every few minutes going, Jesus, dude, what's going on?
You're not watching the same movie?
Except for, I agree with what Hef said earlier. That whole last fight scene was way too long. I actually put it on 1.5 speed for the last 10 minutes because I just didn't care anymore.
I agree. I think the last fight scene should have been shaved by a couple minutes. I probably would have even cut the Zeppelin fight scene.
Yeah, there was, and that's another thing is like they just, and Hef was touching on this earlier. Too many fight scenes. The fight scenes were really over the top. Not that I don't like over the top fight scenes, but to me it just wasn't the kind of story that demanded that. Yeah.
I did like watching the way, especially after you see like the picture of Jim Gordon and his boxing stance. When you watch Jack the Ripper, he's literally fighting like one of those old-timey boxers with his, I don't even know what you call the stance.
Yeah.
Backwards fist.
The have at you stance.
Alright, so we're moving on from characters into scary shit.
Scary shit. Scary shit.
It is time to talk about scary shit. What shit was scary?
What shit was not?
It is time to talk about scary shit.
In comparison to the comic and on its own merits, what horror elements were in this movie and was it scary?
I think the only sort of horror elements that exist in this is the idea that there's a serial killer going around. It wasn't even really framed as a horror. It was framed more of like a mystery.
I think it lost a lot of the horror elements that are in this. Like I
think the art helped with the horror feel of the comic book.
The comic book, I can definitively say this is a horror book. This is a horror story, even though it's not scary.
Yeah.
This is more like horror adjacent.
Yeah.
With the exception, this is a lot more gory and more violent. Like the stabbing scenes.
When Poison Ivy got stabbed, you got the feeling that was a woman who was being stabbed.
Yeah, that was more visceral than anything. The comic, as we've established, is more about less is more.
It's like when you hear a story about someone getting stabbed 67 times and you don't have a concept of that until it's on the screen in front of you.
Yes.
Did he die? It's like, it's one of my favorite jokes from a TV show. Like, I can't remember a TV show. It's just literally like someone comes in and like, guys, this person, they got shot 110 times, and the first thing did he die? He got shot 110 times. Yeah, yes, he fucking died.
Super dead.
One of my favorite lines from a TV show.
So we're back to Elliot Rodger, one of his victims he stabbed like 90 times.
Wasn't his roommate?
It was his roommate.
Shit.
He stabbed his roommate 90 times.
I wish you wouldn't have made me watch that.
Because he wanted to use his apartment as a torture chamber where he would lure beautiful people in to kill, but his roommates were there, so they were in the way, so he killed his roommates, who were nerdy Asians.
I mean, make an omelet.
They were probably like in their rooms playing Pokemon Red and Blue on their Game Boys, and he's over there writing a manifesto about how women are...
Well, this happened when we were in college. I don't know which Pokemon was out then.
No, but in college, it was cool to like pull out
like retro games. Yeah. Okay, that's true.
Okay, so moving on to one of my favorite sections.
Kiss me, fat boy.
Kiss me, fat boy. Where we talk about sex in relation to the stories that we read and watch. I'm going to throw it to you, Hef, and talk about, in general, not only in Gotham by Gaslight, but just in DC movies in general. I feel like there's a lot of injection of sex scenes that don't exist in the comic books that they're based on. What's your thought on that in general, and also specifically in regards to Gotham by Gaslight?
Okay. We'll go with Gotham first, and then I'll broad out to DC.
Because, spoiler alert, the sex scene in the stagecoach, well, one, Selina's not in the book. Two, there's no sex scene. So go ahead.
Okay. It's a film about Jack the Ripper, you would immediately think that there's going to be like some sex sequences or something like that, or even just like a general sexual undertone that would be taken with it. Yeah, because it's a misogynistic idea. Is he's just killing women. So I mean, obviously you think misogyny is not too far away from like sexual deviancy. But, you know, this movie doesn't push that. I mean, it's basically, there's a guy running around killing women. Why is he killing women? They're easy targets, because he's bigger than them. Like, it's not in being prostitutes and various things like, you know, the tones of the Jack the Ripper theme, they're still people, like, and they're still, like, people that are getting killed. So, I mean, it's one of those things where I don't think there's anything that was overly pushed as far as, like, a sexual undertone or anything like that, because there didn't really need to be, at least from my perspective of it. As far as DC in general, I think we also have to keep in mind that I think the reason there's not a whole lot of sexual undertones is because it's DC. DC is still, I think, holds on to an older style of beliefs as far as general awareness, as far as like sexuality in terms of like its now specifically in terms of its home media.
I have input for this, but it's basically more about the fans than it is the writers.
Mm-hmm.
There's an entire Reddit of fans, and it's mostly female fans and gay fans, where they talk about who draws Dick Grayson's ass the best.
I mean, fans are freaks.
Yeah.
I mean,
No, this isn't a criticism. It just made me think of that. So.
I mean, I'm sure that's not
I am
wrong.
a Star Wars freak. I'm just gonna put it out there.
I have my own opinion over who draws Dick Grayson's ass the best. So.
Before I continue with my point, I need to know who your answer is.
Jim Lee.
Jim Lee, yeah. Okay, Jim Lee's like a god, though. Anyway, it's because it's home media. I think they still have like this, and it's not that it's a bad thing. They still have like an old world. I know what you're fucking looking up over there. I hate you for it.
Damn.
You got
That's
them,
from Batman R.A.P.
He got them glutes.
The fuck?
Yeah, literally, it's like a whole subgenre of fans. Fans have a tendency to sexualize things more than artists intend.
I agree with that.
Though there is a lot of undertones, especially when editorial won't let people write what they want.
You mean like when everybody's like, Kylo Ren and Rey should fuck, and they fucking made them kiss in the last... Never mind, go. Keep going.
Again, it's, DC I think still attributes its animation. So like, since animation is still, I think most people assume animation is primarily geared towards children or teenagers. So I think that they intentionally don't go as far as they could.
But I would say, like, specifically the DC animated films often add sex that doesn't exist in the comics they're adapted
Okay,
from.
Example I'll take from that is Batman Harley Quinn.
I haven't watched that one.
Goofy. It's a goofy, weird, bizarre one.
I was literally the only person who was a fan of that. So.
It's basically
Harley Quinn
like,
rapes Dick Grayson. There you go.
I've seen memes of that.
Yep, it happens. Now I will that's the thing. Like, Batman Harley Quinn is basically if you took Batman the animated series, like the New Adventures of Batman,
and let Bruce Timm write it,
and let Bruce Timm see like it's finally time to get Harley laid. Like, that's basically what that was.
Well, he needed to explain who was the father of Harley Quinn's children so she could get to Batman Beyond.
I mean, yeah. Don't bring up Batman Beyond. We'll be here all night. That's my subgenre of Batman that I am a part of, that I'm very, very fond of.
Terry McGinnis.
I love Batman Beyond.
I love Batman Beyond.
Yeah.
I'm upset that they might not do Batman Beyond as a movie now.
I know. Anyway, I think, again, as far as like sex as a rule, I think DC tries to kind of keep I think the animated universe tries to keep it. I would like, aside from the rapiness of the Batman Harley Quinn, they keep it as pretty much as PG as they possibly could. And then Harley Quinn the series came out, and it was just like, yeah, you know what, whatever.
I'm going to disagree here, because I feel like every time I watch a new one of these, they're always adding a sex scene when one didn't exist
I think it's the level of sex scene, though.
I mean, they're not graphic sex scenes.
That would be where I would differ.
Maybe it's because of the number of DC comics I read, but I think they have a lot of sex in their comics.
A
lot of
Yeah, but I'm
stuff.
talking about specifically the ones that are being adapted as movies.
Oh yeah, they add sex scenes because they want a sex scene.
The Killing Joke is the only one
That's the worst.
Like
one.
the Killing Joke, and then
in Gotham by Gaslight, also the whole stagecoach thing that not in it at all. And and in Red Sun, they add the whole lesbian Wonder Woman thing that's not in the book at all.
I think that's just more them trying to be proactive, rather not necessarily the best executed, but again, I feel like that's just more them trying to be proactive towards the LGBTQ community.
Well, maybe for the Red Sun one, yes, but not the.
I love that Ryan is just still looking up comic book asses right now.
I mean, you guys know I have a porn addiction, but
I'm assuming it's your turn then, because that's pretty much my point. I think they still stay PG as far as their sex scenes, just because they don't want to. Because once you pass that gap, can you really not have that? And then it becomes a thing, and nobody really wants that.
Do you have anything to add to that, Daniel?
I think in recent years, DC has been a lot more open in their sexuality, but it's unfortunately mostly been to its detriment, and that is all I am going to say, because I will not have any popular opinions on the subject. I think that they have very actively tried to be progressive, which is admirable, and in their attempt to do so, they have represented bisexual men very poorly, almost exclusively as cheaters. You can't just grab a bisexual man without actually showing him kiss a man. And it doesn't matter that he's in a relationship. Bisexual men need to kiss men. That's how you know. Sorry, that's my tangent for DC. Do better with how you represent people.
You got anything to add, Ryan? Or are you still over there?
No, what I said to you was my. I was mostly thinking of Killing Joke and also the stagecoach scene. While funny, was completely kind of just out of nowhere for me in this. Although I loved how easily Bruce got into the excuse me, officer. But
that was very Bruce Wayne-y.
Yeah.
I also like that him having sex with Selena was what led Selena to being unable to get Harvey Dent to help her. You want to talk about it, so I can't help you. You're a grown adult with your own relationship.
Oh my God! Are you Stephen King? No, I'm Dean Koontz. Oh.
Okay, Kings and Koontzes. I'll go ahead and kick this off. My king of this film. Never mind, I'm not going first. Daniel, go ahead.
My king was Jim Gordon being Jack the Ripper.
Oh, I know my Koontz.
and my Koontz was them not having enough of the historical parallels like Freud or Sherlock Holmes.
Yes. F.
Okay. My king is, as I said earlier, I feel like this movie was intentionally structured and designed with a steampunky / Victorian era environment in mind. I think that was important to set the actual tone of the movie. I liked that general. I like steampunk and Victorian era. So much like you had strong feelings for like the Jim Gordon or whatever stuff like that. I have just had a real good feeling from the tone of the movie because it's that Victorian era, it's that steampunky aspects that I really enjoy steampunk more than others. I'm one of the few who have watched The Last Exile more than 3 times. And
I don't think I made it past episode 3.
My point. But I
love Steam Boy though.
I like those aspects of things, and I think that set the tone really well. And Bruce Greenwood, as usual, just knocks it out of the park.
I've never been a particular fan of the steampunk genre. I do think aesthetically it worked in this movie.
As far as my Koontz, just cut down on the fight scenes, DC. Like, we don't need that many in that excessive amount.
I think I didn't like that he had 4 different interactions with Jack the Ripper, and that it was almost like this like Team Rocket thing where they're just like Ash and Team Rocket just bouncing off each other like 4 different times until
Yeah.
That's copyrighted material.
where he's
Motherfucker.
obviously in the book, like the first time when Batman finds Jack the Ripper, it's over. There's no fight, it's just over. Obviously, that wasn't going to work in a 75-minute movie. They had to have more interactions than one, but it was definitely too many.
Yeah.
King, I think my favorite part of the movie is probably Selena Kyle. I thought she was great. Koontz is Jim Gordon. And I'm not going to say any more about that. And I didn't even really explain a lot on that, but mostly because I think it's an emotional thing for me more than a rational thing.
That makes sense. That's fair.
Yeah. Okay, so I gave you both a homework assignment. If you could commission an Elseworld book, be it Batman or other DC characters, what would it be? Chris, we're going with you first.
Well, seeing as how I just learned what Elseworld was today, because I didn't do my homework, even though I printed this off 5
Daniel,
days
you
ago.
always do your homework. Go first.
I would do a Superman story, big surprise, but I would incorporate Batman. I would like to
Is he a terrorist?
No, instead of Krypton exploding, Earth does, and Batman is sent to Krypton.
Ooh, that'd be interesting.
And he's adopted by Jor-El.
Not even. I mean, just because. Well, one, you get to see Batman on Krypton, but also you get to see Clark. Well, not even Clark. Kal-El raised by his legitimate parents.
Yes, and that would be the Elseworld story I would commission.
You would think that would have been done by now.
As far as I have been able to find, that has not been done yet.
Yeah, I would read that. I would read that for sure.
If I were to have one, as far as just general, I like I like Jim Gordon, like as a role. I've always enjoyed the idea that Jim Gordon would have a superhero persona.
He did for a while.
For like just something
the suit,
in that ballpark.
Yeah.
The mech.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. I don't have a lot of like alternative history
Look like
things
a
like
rabbit.
that. I don't know. I would need to think about that, but
I
do have. I like the again. I'm a fan of the idea of superheroes origins altered just a bit.
Just like a hair.
Yeah, and
See
then
what
like in
happens.
ones like this one where it's just like the story didn't need to change.
Yeah.
All that needed to change was the ear.
Yeah.
And so stuff like that, I enjoy things like that.
So mine is actually not Batman either. Mine is my second favorite DC superhero, Wonder Woman.
I was gonna say Plastic Man.
I love if it's not Wonder Woman, Plastic Man is great, but it would either be The Question
The Question I love.
or Booster Gold.
The guy from I remember him from Limited.
Yeah.
I
Oh
think.
my god, I love
Booster Girl was also pretty baller.
He was the ball.
Blue Beetle's cool too. I like Blue Beetle. Who are the two guys? Hawk and Dove.
Yeah, Hawk
They're
and
cool.
Dove.
Yeah.
All right, so Wonder Woman. So I've read a lot of Wonder Woman, not as much as Batman, but I've read a fair bit. A lot of her stories, or maybe close to all of her stories, come with her being raised on Themyscira and then going out into man's world and how she interacts with humanity. I would like to see Wonder Woman who maybe she was lost as a child, like maybe like she was dropped in the ocean accidentally as a child and found
A baptism gone wrong.
and found by some people on a ship. Wonder Woman raised in the real world,
And then discovering her home or something.
and then like discovering
okay.
like her ancestry and making it back to Themyscira.
Feminism's a thing? That would be great.
Well, that's the thing is,
Yeah.
does she grow up the same? Does she grow up to be the Diana we know, or is she a different Diana?
No, I would read that.
She's still hooking up with Batman in my image of it.
I mean, I also accept that. I ship that. I ship pretty hard.
I ship Justice League, like Batman and Wonder Woman. I thought that was fun.
That was a great episode.
I thought that was fun.
Okay, so moving on to some further reading. If you enjoy Gotham by Gaslight, some more elsewhere titles. Batman Book of the Dead by Doug Mensch. That's the Egyptian one I really enjoy. Batman Nosferatu by Jean-Marc L'Officier. The Just Imagine books by Stan Lee are great. Superman Red Sun by Mark Millar is one of my all-time favorite comic books.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And some more Batman titles that aren't alternate histories, but have a similar tone and feel to Gotham by Gaslight. Batman Gothic by Grant Morrison. Batman The Long Halloween by Jeff Loeb. And as I mentioned in our last episode, if you want to know more about Jack the Ripper, check out Season 3 of the Unobscured podcast by Aaron Mankey, who's the guy who does lore. It's a deep, deep dive on the real history of Jack the Ripper. Anybody else have any other suggestions for if you like Gotham by Gaslight you might like?
Court of Owls.
Court of Owls is great. Can't recommend
City Owls. Just
City of Owls,
anything with owls in the title.
If you like the general, like the dark tones and then the like sharp colors or various things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Again, like I don't know much about the book or anything like that. But if you're into those like I don't know, oddly placed kind of characters in as far as like some of these were in like kind of a time that they don't really don't typically exist in, I'd check out Fables.
Oh, yeah.
That's one that's like I kind of like it has that kind of noir-y kind of feel where like you have these characters that are very very much out of place of where they are supposed to be.
Yeah.
If I had
but
to
it
pick,
still works like for that particular deal.
Fables might be my favorite comic book franchise. Like period. Like it might be.
Another recommendation, if you like the Jack the Ripper aspect, but for some godforsaken reason, not the Batman aspect, Alan Moore's From Hell, which is just a Jack the Ripper story.
Yeah.
Oh.
Be prepared for two things if you do go that route. Number one, I think it's at least 500 pages.
It's a lot longer than this.
And number two, that art is rough.
Yeah.
That art is real rough. It took me.
They made a choice with their artist.
It took me, I think, 2 magnifying glasses and a microscope to realize there was a man's penis I was looking at.
It's also it very heavily leans into a Jack the Ripper conspiracy. So please, for whatever reason, do not read that and then go, "Oh, this makes perfect sense. This must be who Jack the Ripper was." Because I'm so sick of that being an explanation that I hear from people.
And if you like alternate reality, Batman's definitely Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah.
Like that. That's about as alternate reality as you get, but it's still like one of the better ones.
I like to be a hipster on that one and say it's overrated, which I do think is true, but it is still good.
It's still worth reading.
Yeah, I've read it twice myself. I will definitely read it a third time. I've read most of the sequels. Have you guys read the sequels?
I read the first sequel, and then I decided not to read anymore.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Dark. It's noticeably worse. Noticeably worse.
Okay, so the second one, The Dark Knight Strikes Back, I did not like on the first read. I read it a second time before I read Dark Knight 3, and I liked it more. But Dark Knight 3 Master Race is pretty good. And there's a fourth one now, Dark Knight The Golden Child.
I would also like to read Frank Miller's Superman. What was it, Year One?
I really like the first 2 issues of Superman Year One. I did not like the third issue, but the first 2 I thought were great.
Yeah, that's been on my reading list for a while.
Yeah.
One last recommendation, and this is if you're like me, who sometimes comes in like to a podcast, if you will, without reading the content that was actually talked about earlier.
What's a podcast?
We mentioned earlier The Dark Knight Returns, the book. Try the films.
The
DC animated films, there's 2, they're technically 2 parts, but I think they have them now as like a 2.5 hour movie length.
They have a combined one.
I don't even think they sell them
I am one of those
anymore.
people where like if you like I had a hard time reading the first one because
it's very wordy.
It's very wordy. While there are some
And
Like, there are some takebacks from the, like, whenever they animated it. I think what they got out of it, like, what they were able to do with it, ended up being a lot better than it could have been.
on the whole, I would say the Dark Knight Returns animated movie, like Year One, is one of the ones that's more true to the adaptation or to the original book. Yeah, I think they're really good. And if you can't make it through the book, definitely watch the movies because they're pretty great.
Also, Peter Weller is old Batman. If you don't know that,
That was also
and he's
a very good.
He's
Batman
very
piece
good.
That I think a certain segment of fans were too rough on.
I don't.
There's a segment of fans that if it's not Kevin Conroy, they throw a fit.
Yeah, I can see that.
So,
Okay. Well, before we sign off here, I just got to give you all a preview of what's going on next. As we've said for the past few episodes, our next novel is going to be Stephen King's Firestarter. We are going to cover that in our very next episode. That episode is going to drop on April the 17th. The following episode, the following week, April the 24th, we are going to cover the original movie Firestarter from 1984, starring my girl, Drew Barrymore. Shut up.
I love how excited he gets over Drew Barrymore every time.
3 fist bumps to himself right now.
And of course, we are doing this. This wasn't in our original schedule. We're doing this because of the new adaptation of Firestarter. But the following week, we're going to be on our next book, April 1st. We've been talking about it for months.
May 1st.
I'm sorry, May 1st. We've been talking about it for months. We're finally starting Stephen King's It.
Yes.
His master thesis on horror. And of course, we are breaking this book up into 5 different episodes. So the episode dropping May 1st, we are going to cover book 1 and the first interlude. The following week, we're going to cover Firestarter 2 Rekindled.
Oh boy.
Which is the 2-episode miniseries, which is the sequel, which we'll get to that. And then we're going to be back the next week, May the 15th, with Stephen King's It Book 2 in the second interlude. May the 22nd, we are going to drop our episode on Firestarter 2022, the new movie.
I'm excited.
I'm super excited. Have you finished the book yet?
No, I'm on page 400.
When you finish the book, go back and rewatch the trailer. And I'm going to tell you, you're going to see that trailer and say, this looks nothing like the book, but I'm still excited.
Okay.
At least that's my opinion on it. But we'll talk more about that when we get to our Firestarter episode. And then the next week, May 29th, we're going to continue with it, Book 3 and the third interlude. Hef, thank you very much for coming up for these 2 episodes. We are, at some point later this year, we are going to cover Rumiko Takahashi's Mermaid Saga, which we've already established. We're going to have you back for that. But I would love to talk you into reading, maybe not it, but reading a horror novel and joining us back for that. I think if I can make a recommendation, if we're going to cover Salem's Lot later this year, which is a shorter Stephen King book, and it's about vampires, which I know vampires are sometimes in your wheelhouse. Just putting it out there. I'd love to have you on that episode.
Oh, I mean,
Peer pressure.
peer pressure. I mean, I'm certain if we can get that set up, I mean, that's not a problem.
We're going to be
Been
covering
trying
that.
to read more, so that's definitely something
We're going to be covering that in September because the new movie comes out in September. Or even if you don't read the book, you could be one of our. You could watch one of the movies and be on our movie episode. That'd be cool too. And then you can be our perspective from somebody who hasn't read the book and has only seen the movie. But you have an open invitation to join any of our stuff.
Sure. I'm just glad to be here. I mean, I know you all talked about it for a while, and since it was horror, it was just like, I don't really feel like I have a lot to contribute as far as that. So, but I mean, I could be enticed, and I mean, assuming I'm not completely booked and/or this episode hits a record low for your all's listening, then you should be
The record low would be in the negatives.
prepare to be amazed.
People will go back in time to unwatch the episode.
They actually just delete their entire browser history, including their Google accounts.
Oh, wow.
We're being a little hard on ourselves. We are actually starting to get a few listeners.
Yeah.
So shout outs to you, the people who are listening to this show. We deeply appreciate it. Daniel and I would probably keep doing it even if we only had 1 or 2 listeners, but we're starting to get a few more, which I really appreciate. And for all of you who are listening, please stay tuned. You're going to hear our socials. Definitely check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Ask for our Discord link. Join our Discord page. All of that. All the specifics are coming up soon. The last thing I have to say to you tonight is thank you for listening and stay scary.
Well, that was horrendous. I would tell you boys good job, but the dryness of my sarcasm would likely evaporate all the moisture in both your bodies. Anyway, if you want to hear more of this, please subscribe to their YouTube channel by searching for The Horror of Babylon. You can follow them on Twitter at HorrorPod69. The Facebook page is under The Horror of Babylon. And on Instagram these fools are The Horror of Babylon, one word. Reach their assuredly empty inbox at thehorrorofbabylonpodcast at gmail.com. You can also request their Discord server link via any other channel. And finally, if you are foolish enough to support this abomination financially, search for The Horror of Babylon on patreon.com. And God save your soul if you do.